Hello there, and welcome to the Get French Football News preview show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening are Adam White and Samuel Rooke. The Ides of March are upon us, and it's time to pay our debts. But did French football stride proudly through to the next stage of the Europa League, or was it wishful boasting after their first leg victories? All of that, and a look at the weekend ahead in Ligue after the latest headlines. Paris Saint-Germain had a midweek Ligue 1 match at 4 p.m. of all times to attend to as they squeezed past Angers 2-1, despite having Thiago Motta sent off in the first half. Kylian Mbappe notched a brace as the away side came back into it through substitute Carl Toko Ekambi, but manager Stéphane Moulin admitted his side's focus is on their weekend fixture against Caen. In the Europa League this evening, Marseille cruised into the next round as they comfortably saw off Athletic Bilbao 2-1 on the night and 5-2 on aggregate. A Dimitri Payet penalty and a Lucas Ocampos finish won the day, with Aritz Aduriz seeing red in the second half. In Lyon, they ended up crashing out to CSKA Moscow as the Russians won 3-2 in the evening, or 3 all on aggregate, so through away goals. Alexander Golovin gave them a lead in the first half, but Kone managed to equal things up. 2 quick-fire goals within 5 minutes by Ahmed Musa and Pontus Wernbloom helped the away side into a comfortable lead, with Mariano Diaz having a consolation with 71 minutes left, but they could not squeeze past their opponents. In off-the-field news as well, Lille have finally been delivered their punishment for the actions that happened at the weekend's game with a pitch invasion. Their stadium, the Stade Pierre-Mauroy, will be closed to fans until further notice. It's an indefinite ban that might extend for the rest of the season. And that's all for now. But for all your latest in the world of French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We'll start this week with those 2 games in the Europa League, and we'll go for the positive one, if anything, first, Adam, and that's Marseille's victory against Bilbao. It never really seemed in question after that comfortable victory in the first leg, although there was that away goal for the Spanish side that gave them a little bit of leeway still in the tie, but Marseille were professional, had a good side, and ended up killing this one relatively quickly.
Yeah, I definitely think so. It did sort of put the tie a little bit beyond doubt after that first leg 3-1 win, as you mentioned. But as you said, Marseille were professional and put out a strong side despite the Lyon game at the weekend, and they got the job done. It was, as you said, a professional and sort of well-organised performance from Garcia's side. And it was nice to see that they went with a more attacking formation. Perhaps away in Europe this year, they haven't been the most expansive or even the most impressive overall. You know, a lot of their success so far in Europa League has come from home games. In the group games, you know, they were much better at home than they were away. And in the previous round as well, they won the home leg. So it was nice to see them attack, starting with Lopez alongside Luis Gustavo in that midfield. Payet centrally as well. 3, very forward-thinking forwards, obviously, as well. So it was good to see them attack, and they deserved their win. It was a really good performance.
Yeah, really nice performance from the team, and with a strong side, which was a little bit surprising. It was surprising that they didn't try and bring more of them off, though. But I wanted to highlight someone that, especially in the last couple of weeks, has come into the fore, and someone, especially myself, and I'll openly admit this, I've ridiculed in the past, and that's Lucas Ocampos. He scored a fair few goals. He scored 2 in the first leg. He scored 1 this evening. He grabbed 1 against Toulouse at the weekend as well. He's really started performing well in the last couple of weeks. He's got himself into the first team lineup, and that's a difficult thing with Morgan and Sanson obviously playing sometimes on the left-hand side, or Dimitri Payet moving on that side when they play a 3-man midfield with Gustavo and Sambo and Guisa and Sanson himself as well. He's forced his way into this team now, and he's starting to score goals, and he was really dangerous in this one. I thought he was positive. Every time he got the ball, he looked to go forward and try and attack. He scored a really nice goal, and it's a sign of him maybe maturing. I think we sometimes forget that he's only 23. He'll be 24 in July, which is crazy to think about how long he's seemingly been in French football and Italian football briefly, obviously, as well. But a really good performance from him tonight, and Jordan Amavi as well, who maybe should be a little bit gutted that he's not had a France call-up as well, although maybe injuries recently, especially, might have held him back from that. But let's talk about Lyon's defeat as well, because I want to come back to Marseille and the next round after this, because obviously, Sam, Lyon are out this evening after losing 3-2 to CSKA Moscow. Now, they got a great performance in Russia, a big 1-0 win with that away goal, but moments of madness, bits of weakness. It kind of feels like Lyon's season, doesn't it? They have one impressive moment where they have a really good result, and then they've backed that up with what sadly is a disappointment, and they won't be playing that home final anymore.
Yeah, I think you've really hit the nail on the head there. In terms of it just sort of encapsulating everything that Lyon have been about this season. Great performances backed up with headless chicken performances, and tonight was very much the latter. I mean, clearly they had the talent to win the game, but it was just another example of Lyon lacking organisation, lacking maturity, which perhaps could be understood to an extent given how young the team are. To go out in the round of 16 is no great shame, obviously, but they would have believed they could beat this team, especially with the 1-0 away win in Russia, eye on a quarterfinal place, and then who knows, the fact that the final was going to be, in Lyon, a huge target for them. This is a step backwards. Last season they lost the semi-final, so they've done less well this season, and it's very, very disappointing for a team that really looked good in moments in Europe, looked impressive, looked like they were sort of seasoned campaigners compared to some of the teams they come up against, and to go out like this is very disappointing.
Yeah, a frustrating one, isn't it, Adam? Looking at the side, obviously, there's no Nabil Fekir. He's still picking up a knock and still not quite to full fitness, but no Aouar at all this evening, which is an interesting one. Jordan Ferry got the start as well. Maxwell Cornet got his goal as well. But looking at the CSKA team as well, and the performances they've had in the Champions League, they had some good games at home, but they were pretty bad away. And they have a trio of backline of the Berezutski brothers and Ignashevich, who might be the slowest in existence, really, in all of football. You could probably put those in League Two and have strikers go past them, really, with speed. But you have to feel like, no disrespect to CSKA, well played for advancing, but with a 1-0 lead and away goal, Lyon should be pouncing on them in the first couple of minutes and ending this one quickly, shouldn't they?
Yeah, I'm really disappointed, as Sam said. It was a bit sort of a headless chicken performance. But when you sort of look at, as you said, when you look at CSKA Moscow and you look at Ahmed Musta, for example, who's one of their most important players and has been before and after his Leicester excursion, and how poor he was for Leicester, and you sort of shows the level that perhaps CSKA Moscow are at this season. Lokomotiv are winning the Russian league, and they're definitely not as strong as they once were. As you mentioned, the Berezutski brothers, even Alan Jaguar has been there for a long time, as good a player as he is. Akinfeev's, been there a long time. They're not the team they once were. They're on the decline. A lot of their players are. So you would have hoped after that away win, that brilliant 1-0 away win, because obviously Moscow and Russia is a very difficult place to go traditionally. That was a great result, and then to come to this game, and the second half was so open and so end to end that Lyon kind of lost their way. I mean, towards the end, they had some one or two really big chances. Mailida should have scored. Diakabi at the back post sliding in was unlucky, to not to score there too. So it's fine margins, but I think they've this should be their priority, and to rest players for this game seems a little bit counterproductive, because they're 9 points behind Monaco and 5 behind Marseille. So they're not out of the race for the Champions League places, but I don't see them coming second. So this is probably their best opportunity to get into the Champions League, and they're a cup team when you look at them. The way that their squad's kind of evolved, they've got lots of exciting individual, kind of quick, fast, skillful players. On the day can be anyone, and the cups competitions kind of suit them. So you would have hoped that Genesio would have felt like, we can win this competition. They really could. And as Sam mentioned, the fact that it was at the final was in Lyon as well is a big plus for them. So to rest Morel, no Aouar at all, as you mentioned, rest Bertrand Traore, it seems a bit of an odd move. I don't know, and to prioritise the league, that suggests that's what they're doing. I know it's Marseille at the weekend, but even so, I still feel like that this is the competition that they perhaps have more of a chance of making the group stage of the Champions League, because obviously if they come third, they've got to go through the qualifiers as well. So it seems like a bizarre decision. All right, it's still a relatively strong team. Fekir injury doesn't help either, but counterproductive, and I'm disappointed in him. I think Genesio, although the sort of mid part of the season up until that PSG win, he was sort of in the ascendancy, I kind of feel like perhaps we're returning to that feeling that perhaps he isn't the right person for the job anymore. And they're sort of much like CSKA in a very shorter term, a bit on a decline, Leon. They haven't played well for a number of months now, and perhaps when it comes to the summer, if they finish fourth, Genesio might not last the off season.
Yeah, the Europa League feels a little bit more like an anomaly for Lyon this season now than anything else, really. After that really successful part and that loss, that win against Paris Saint-Germain, they've really sank like a stone, which is pretty baffling. And we'll talk about them a little bit later because they have got that big game at the weekend. But let's talk very quickly, Sam, about the next round, really, of the Europa League. The draw will be made tomorrow after the Champions League draw. But looking at the teams left in, you're looking at Atletico Madrid, Lazio, Sporting of Portugal, RB Leipzig, Arsenal, CSKA Moscow, and Salzburg, who managed to knock out Borussia Dortmund this evening. There's not really an easy draw in there. Some might argue Salzburg, some might say CSKA out of the ones you would probably prefer, but it just gets harder and harder, really. Do Marseille still have a chance at this competition, or do you think that maybe the amount of good teams that are left in it, I'm thinking of Atletico Madrid, Lazio are in fantastic form as well. Arsenal showed tonight that they're good enough to win this competition. Are they still within the favourites, or maybe are they sort of hoping for a good draw and then hopefully that semi-finals, when you get to that kind of stage, anything can happen?
Yeah, I think calling them one of the favourites would be a stretch. I mean, they're one of the 8 favourites, so that's something. But no, you can't really say that you expect them to beat Atletico Madrid over 2 legs. Lazio this season over 2 legs, who look very, very strong. There are beatable teams. There are certainly beatable teams. CSKA, as we've just watched, over 2 legs, not particularly impressive. Certainly beatable. Salzburg, as you mentioned, another one. But yeah, there are some stronger teams than Marseille at this point. But I mean, that's what a European tournament is all about. You get to the quarterfinals of a European competition, you want to play these big teams, and this is why Marseille got so excited at the end of last season when they qualified for the Europa League, because they wanted to be here. And now they are the only French team left, and that's a huge credit to them. You probably wouldn't have predicted that 6 months ago, but they've done a great job. I mean, this win over Athletic over 2 legs is fantastic, and they can definitely still be hoping to win this. I mean, ideally, I think you avoid Atletico until the final, try and beat them in 1 game, but every other team in this is probably still beatable.
Absolutely. I mean, they would have bitten your hand off if you were to mention that Marseille will be the last French team in Europe at the start of the season. I'm sure many Marseille fans will take that badge and run with it for the next couple of months, at least until the season's end, at least. But it will be interesting to see if they can try and avoid some of those bigger teams, at least for one more round, if they can. I mean, Salzburg have had a terrific tournament, but 16 European games, it's going to affect their legs at some point soon. Let's talk about the strange midweek game we had this week. Obviously, Paris Saint-Germain have the cup final in a couple of weeks' time. That's why this fixture was rearranged for today. The Monaco one we played sometime midweek before that one as well. Adam, it was not necessarily a routine win, you would necessarily say. In the last couple of weeks, they've mixed things up. They've added like the likes of Nkunku. This was more of a traditional Paris Saint-Germain side, you might say. But a double for Kylian Mbappe, which will be great for him. But Thiago Motta getting himself sent off wasn't ideal, and he certainly left his mark on Romain Thomas, who didn't look too pleased about it either.
No, it was definitely. I kind of had a feeling of a very strange game, given that it was at this bizarre time of 4:00 London time and obviously 5:00 Paris time on a Wednesday, a very unusual time for a league game. And we were discussing before we came on air that I don't know how anyone made it to that game after work, but they did manage it, and it was definitely a game of a few talking points. You mentioned Motta sending off. It was a very sort of interesting situation because Thomas slides in to tackle him and kind of cleans Motta out a little bit, and Motta's up in the air and he sort of comes down. And I think he could easily not land on Thomas. And Thomas on the floor, Motta walks away. The referee, doesn't give anything. It's pretty clear that his studs have sort of quite severely scraped down Romain Thomas' ribs. And you can see, I think there's a point where he's off the side of the pitch. Thomas about to come back on. He's got quite a nasty sort of graze or cut on the side of his ribs, and it's a bit of a silly thing to do for Motta. I mean, because he's going to miss some more. Would he be suspended possibly for the cup final now? because it's after the international break, so it's their next game but one. So you'd imagine you get more than one game banned for this. So you obviously miss a weekend game, and then the game after is that cup final. So he won't be available for that, you'd imagine, if it is deemed to be, violent play, which it probably will be. He'll probably get a 3-game ban. So it just seemed a bit of a strange thing to do in a heat of the moment. So that was unfortunate. One thing that really stood out for me in this game was with Jackson. We had a really, really good game. His pass for one of Mbappe's chances, it may have even been his first goal, was unbelievable. And it just really underlines the sheer insanity that he didn't play in he wouldn't start either of the Real Madrid legs, and the Chelsea out of position in defensive midfield, even though Rabiot can play in position for the first leg, and surely he was a really good option for the second leg. He's a very, very good player, and as he was at Schalke, as he was at Wolfsburg as well, he was brilliant for PSG in the second half of last season, and when he's been given a chance this year, he's really been very, very good for the most part, and he's really adapted to a deeper role. Yesterday, he looked really happy to come deep, pick up the ball, pick passes, and he's technically very, very gifted, obviously. So he's great at that. So I think going forward, Jackson would for me be starting pretty much every game, and he really underlined his quality yesterday. So that was really good to see. So a couple of interesting points for PSG. One positive with Draxler and a big negative with Motto, who probably missed the final now.
Yeah, which maybe gives a glimmer of hope to Monaco when they do face them in a couple of weeks' time. But an interesting one really for Angers as well, Sam. It wasn't the Paris Saint-Germain side that really swept them aside. There was a red card relatively early on that gave them a little bit of a chance. But Moulin did say before the game that they were focusing on that game at the weekend. But once that happened, should they have maybe gone a bit more for it? I mean, after Carl Toko Ekambi did score, they did have a couple of chances. PSG had a couple on the break, fair enough, but they had their opportunity maybe to steal a draw, which would have been massive for them.
Yeah, I mean, the last sort of half an hour, it turned into a siege. Kevin Trapp looked very ropey in the PSG goal. They really should have just put the foot down as soon as they could have done. I mean, as soon as Thiago Motta was off, I mean, the fact that they then go and concede another goal against 10 men, then you're 2-0 down. It feels like a deep hole to get out of. I've got to imagine it feels like a real gut punch for the players to turn around and think, well, Motta's off, great. Oh, we've just conceded again. Fantastic. That must have been difficult. But as they showed in the second half, when they actually went at them, PSG were there to be got at. They had plenty of chances towards the end of that game to draw level. Trapp actually made a couple of really, really good saves. One low down, just a one-hander pushing the ball away. It really could have been an extra point that Angers would never have counted on having this season. And it has to feel like a disappointment. But I think that second goal was the killer. It probably took a long time for them to recover from that. And by the time they finally did, it wasn't enough time. Perhaps if that game had gone 10 minutes longer, they would have got their point. It sort of feels like a point dropped.
Yeah, which is a shame, but because they're on great form as well. They got 7 points from the last 3 games before that one. It'd have been nice to keep that ticking over when they have a home game against Con that we'll talk about a little bit later, at least anyway. But on to the Ligue 1 games that are happening this weekend, and we start with Friday's game. Apologies, with two sides on very different ends of the spectrum at the moment. Monaco flying high with a great chance here, possibly to get a win, with the two sides below them fighting for possibly getting second. I can't imagine Lyon might be, but at least Marseille possibly dropping points and maybe making second completely their own, versus a Lyon side that have had probably the worst week of the season, which is saying something given how it's been so far for them, really, Adam. I mean, the trouble last weekend was awful. The fact that their stadium will probably be closed for the rest of the season, I would imagine it is even worse. That atmosphere will only be even more eerie. It might have a side effect of maybe giving the players a little bit more comfort, but at the same time, I can't imagine where psychologically this team must be at the moment.
No, it must be terrible. I mean, I think it's kind of this situation, perhaps a combination of Lille fans' idiocy last weekend and the very just decision to close the stadium until that meeting in April, and possibly, as you said at the beginning of the show, it's likely that it'll be for the rest of the season. I think it may relegate them, and by extension, it may end up putting them out of business, because they're in financial trouble if they get relegated. I mean, they're not particularly flush with cash as it is, and they're in genuine trouble of dropping out of professional football in France, as Bassi did last year, as others have done before them. altogether. For a club of Lille side, they won the league in 2011. It would be a just unbelievable disaster for them. So in terms of the worst week, I think it's probably one of the worst weeks in their history. I mean, you look at the table and they're 19th. They're in the relegation zone. You know, they're obviously very tight at the bottom. Angers are in 14th on 32 points. Lille down to 19th and 28. There's obviously a lot to be said in those positions, but it's such a sort of tumultuous season that they're hardly, if you look at the teams around them, they're hardly on the up. They're hardly a team with momentum. The rest of the sides there have probably got a little bit more confidence, a lot more fans in their ground for the rest of the games to play this season. And they feel like that they're the ones who are out of position, they're the ones who are under siege, whereas the rest of those teams, maybe to lose a side, probably expect to be in a position and are, you know, perhaps about par for the season and will happily take 17th or 16th and even 18th and go into, you know, Troyes or Amiens end up in 18th, they get a promoted, so happy with that. But Leo, on the other hand, the atmosphere around the club must be absolutely terrible, given that how the season's gone with Bielsa coming in, and you know they beat Nantes in that first game, looked so good, and you know they're expected to challenge for Europe, and they've just been abysmal for the entire season, and I don't see how they can change that now. I know that Gautier is a very experienced coach, and he did wonders at Seneting, getting the best out of a very average team. But this may be beyond him, and Lille could be in genuine trouble of not just getting relegated, but a lot worse than that. So I think it's alarm bells are ringing in Lille. I honestly don't see how they can get out of this now.
Absolutely. And in fairness, if Galtier does pull this off, what a magic trick he would have pulled for those players to get them back on board and get them back focused on football, because it must be incredibly hard for all of them at the moment, being so young as well, without that many experienced leaders that they ironically shipped out in the summer, really. When you think of Mavuba and the likes of those, and also Enyama still sort of on the sidelines in terms of not really being with the squad. It's must be really tough on them. They hopefully can band around Galtier and he can maybe do something about this. But if there's a team you want to face when you're struggling, it is absolutely not Monaco, really, Sam. They can be such a deadly team, and they're in great form at the moment. They've been incredible in Ligue 1, really. I mean, I think we mentioned it a couple of times, but in all honesty, it's gone slightly under the radar how good they've been recently. It's about 13, 14 games now with them unbeaten in the league, which is an incredible run for them, really. They obviously have games against Paris Saint-Germain coming up that might halt that momentum unless they continue the way they are. But this is the kind of game you don't want to be facing, because Monaco were a team that if they smell blood, this could get ugly.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just described it perfectly. This Monaco are just a brutal animal of a team, and they will, if you give them an inch, which this Lille team will give them an inch, they will take it and take much more. They will do. They will really make this an unpleasant evening for Lille. I cannot imagine anything else other than Monaco really just filling their boots in this game. Lille are really in trouble. And this game is not going to help them one bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking back at the last couple of months, really, looking at how good Monaco have been, I've already mentioned that unbeaten run that sort of stretches all the way back to that Angers win back in December. The only defeats they've had since then are in cups, in the Champions League, and in against Lyon. Since January, they've only been stopped from scoring once. They've only scored only one goal in a game. None of those times either. So there's guaranteed to be goals. And if they're a team like that, they've put 4 past Angers recently, put 4 past the Dijon side recently, they put 3 past Strasbourg, and it probably could have been and should have been more. They are really not a team to be facing in the form they are, with Jovetic scoring goals now as well, in Falcao's absence, with Keita Balde fitting in nicely, with Ronnie Lopez in excellent form. It does really make you worry, really, because, for example, at the weekend, if they'd have stepped on the gas in that second half against Strasbourg, that could have been a heavy result as well. So let's get some predictions in this one, and I'll start with you, Adam. What do you think the score will be?
6-0 Monaco.
Sam?
That is harsh, Adam. I think you might be on the money, though. I'll go for a routine 4-0 win for Monaco.
I'll diddle in the middle on 5, then. I think that's what it just feels like the ugliest game Lille could have faced, really. I mean, looking at their fixtures and everything like that, they have some interesting ones to come, really, that might give them a chance, especially after this one. You think Amiens at home, with an empty stadium might take some of the pressure off, really. Guingamp at home in a couple of weeks as well, who are falling flat. They've only won one in the last 10. Maybe that's a chance for them as well. Metz at the end of that month as well. There's little opportunities here and there that might help them later, but this one is they maybe have to ride the hard stuff in this one before they get to maybe some of the softer ground later on. On to the interesting game that leads on from midweek, which was Moulin mentioning that his Angers side need to focus on this game against Caen at the weekend. And that's the one I want to talk about here on Saturday. And it was an interesting comment, really, from him, Adam. It's always interesting for managers like that are facing relegation battles. But Angers, you would say maybe a slightly with a win here, which it must be Moulin's thinking, against the Caen side that are only 3 points above them anyway and would go above them on goal difference if they did win on this one. This could be a massive one that does finally really pull them out of that relegation mire really once and for all.
Yeah, it would. I mean, if they do win this game, they'll be on 35 points, 8 games to go. I have a feeling that 40 points, the classic 40 points, probably would be more than sufficient to stay up this season. So, a couple more wins and they could be safe. No wonder he didn't prioritise the PSG game. In fact, I think he even said that he didn't think they would beat PSG outright, which is unusual for a manager to say, even in that situation with a smaller club going to someone like PSG, and they're very, very unlikely to get a result, but it's not impossible. And they obviously didn't come too far away from getting something. I think it's probably the best way to go for him, because Angers seem to have followed a very similar path this season as they did last, in that they started okay. They did the classic Angers thing of not getting the results they deserve, but playing pretty well. And then over the winter, they really dropped off and they looked like they were going to get relegated. The same thing happened this year. Last year, it was partly due to the African Nations Cup. They lost a lot of players to that. Shaken Doy being a big miss, of course, and the same case for the whole of this season without him. They've really struggled to replace him. And also this, they finished second bottom of the first half of the season. So over the winter break, they're in the relegation zone. But since they've kind of redoubled their efforts somehow, and they've found that extra level of performance that perhaps they were struggling to find previously. They've been more consistent, they've been more solid, and they've just sort of started to put the results together that some of the performances earlier in the season deserve. As the same kind of thing happened last year, and they finished pretty much mid-table last year. So you look back at their sort of previous results. Good result against Bordeaux last week. They're actually quite good in that game. Pretty even game. I think Poyet's new manager bounce is probably wearing off a little bit already. But still good result away at Bordeaux. 3-0 win against Guingamp when they're really good, although Guingamp are the ultimate mid-table side at the moment. They're already on the beach, as it were. And that win at Lille as well. So, the form since sort of February has been pretty good. And I think Moulin's a very sort of, although he's not a classic Ligue 1 manager, he's a very astute, very wily coach, and he knows how to get the best out of this team. And he's obviously extremely well respected at Angers, getting them up from Ligue 2 and doing so fantastically since, especially in that first season. And he has, unlike perhaps other teams around them, or with Lille maybe especially, he has the confidence and support of his players. Not that Gauté doesn't, but he definitely does, Moulin, and they believe in him, and that really showed in this half of the season as it did in the second half of last season. So, as you say, a win here, although it's at home and against a Caen side who aren't necessarily in form, they could, once again pull themselves away from trouble and finish again in mid-table, which is fantastic because I think aside from Amiens and possibly Troyes, they've got the smallest budget in the league. So it really underlines what a small club they are and how fantastic they've been since they were promoted. So a big game really for them. And if they do get the win, 35 points, they're not far off safety.
Absolutely. And it's strange to think that in this modern age that win against Lille that was big, but only just about on goal difference got them outside of the relegation zone and the playoff place as well. But 4 days after that, they gave Moulin a new contract, and that seems to, in a weird way, galvanise the team in another direction, saying we believe in this manager, we believe in this team of players to get us over the line, rather than try something new, try something for the last 10. 12 games and try somebody else and different ideas. They doubled down on him, and it so far is working. And you look at the games left, even if they don't get this result against Caen, they've got Strasbourg, they've got Toulouse, they've got Metz still to come, and Dijon as well, and teams by that point like Nantes, who might be completely out of the running for fifth or outside of that, at least anyway, 2 games left, that they might already be on the beach. That there are options there for them. There's games left that they have chances in, and that's a real credit to their board to believe in the man that brought them up and brought them to the level of success that they have at the moment. But 3 straight home games to come is a real good chance for them maybe to build some momentum and absolutely put this to bed. And it's an interesting one, Sam, because they do come up against a Caen side that are the super Marmite. Well, I think they're the Marmite team of Ligue 1 football at the moment, really. They do things like they beat Lyon in a quarter-final of the Coupe de France, and they beat Strasbourg really comfortably, but in a sort of battling performance, and then they lose to Lyon, who were in awful form. They lost to Dijon away and didn't really put up a fight against a great home side. They can be one way or the other in each game, but in this kind of match, that means that either it's one team is going to turn up, either it's going to be a bustling, aggressive team that ends up shoving Angers out the way and nicking something, or it's going to be a Caen side that just don't decide to turn up instead and hand Angers a win.
Yeah, and I don't think we should expect Caen to turn over yet. I mean, they are quite a lot further up the table than Angers. They're not exactly in the relegation danger, but only 7 points. You know, stranger things have happened. A team like Caen could easily go on a losing streak and find themselves in trouble. So the players won't be thinking that the job is done, that they're safe already, and they'll know that a game like this is an opportunity to, as you said, push someone aside, push a team aside who have been brittle, who have been not always willing to sort of put in a full shift, perhaps. You know, we said earlier in the season they weren't really getting the results that their play merited, but part of that is down to sort of industry and application, and that's maybe something that this Angers side lack from time to time, and I think they didn't, certainly in recent games. They haven't lacked that against PSG, for example. They really pushed until the final whistle, but Caen as well won't just sit back and allow this game to happen to them. They'll play their game. They most likely won't score any goals because that's just not really their thing, but they won't make it easy for Angers, I don't think.
It'd be interesting to see if, I don't know what the agreement is between Caen and Angers, but if Enzo Crivelli can make that game and starts with, whether he might have a point to prove, maybe given his season with the club, really. But let's get some predictions. I'll start with you this time, Sam. What do you think will happen in this one?
I think this is a nailed-on goalless draw.
Sam? Adam, sorry.
I'm going to go 1-0 Angers.
Yeah, I think I'll agree with you, Adam. I just feel like this is the kind of game where Caen won't lay down. I don't think they're at that point, but they just seem to either be a really good team or a really average team. And I just feel that in this kind of game with a team that has a bit of momentum with them, even though that loss in midweek will hurt a little bit, they'll maybe feel like they can do some more, but they can build on that in this game and get a 1-0 win. 2 games now that are really going to affect those places at the bottom of the table because they are between sides that will be still definitely looking down rather than up. And let's start with the really interesting one for both of them, at least, because it's massive, really, this one, between Amiens and Troyes. Troyes currently occupy that, not the automatic, the playoff relegation place by just a couple of goals, really, above Lille. And Amiens are 2 points above them, really. So Troyes could go above them with a win here. Amiens could start to put a gap between them and those places as well, and maybe even drag teams further down in with them. It's a big game for both teams. Adam, they neither of them are great goal scorers. In fact, they're both, other than Caen, actually, they're the 2 worst goal scorers in the league with 24 goals each. It's going to be a tough one, really, to find out, and especially with Troyes in the last couple of weeks. They've had a couple of little... It felt like they maybe were starting to get some momentum sort of January time, but it sort of fell off. That big win against Metz that felt like that they had gone, but they never really built on that. It's 3 defeats since then, and that sort of hammer blow really against Nantes at the weekend as well, where they thought they might be able to take a point from that game, and that edged them closer to everyone, but they ended up losing it in the final few minutes. Emiliano Sala popping up. This is another big game for them, isn't it?
Yeah, it's huge. It could define their season, really. I mean, losing, because Amiens, although they've been good in spells this year, you know, they were, you know, everyone's favourites to kind of finish or get bottom or to finish bottom or get relegated. So to lose this game, you know, Amiens, they'd be 5 points behind Amiens if they were to lose here. But Troyes have remained competitive, and I think they are a side, as you mentioned, that they just lack that kind of that goal scorer that perhaps other teams not necessarily around them have, but the team, the type of goal scorer that they need to keep them in the division. I don't have that much confidence in Suk, who's on loan from Porto, or Adama Nian, whose attitude's pretty poor. He missed 2 games because he fell out with Garcia, and they kind of lack that focal point. I think there are some really interesting points to them though this season that they can hold on to, and I think Christophe Horel's been fantastic for them at centre back, and he's going to be crucial going into the final few weeks of the season. Really good defender. They've kind of struggled to find a partner for him. I mean, Jimmy Girardon and Osvaldo Vizcarrondo sort of shared that role, but he's really been sort of a leader for them. And unfortunately for Troyes, if they stay up either way, I don't think he'll be there next season. I mean, and a lot of the half of the table could really do with him in their team. And obviously, Cowie on loan from Marseille has been really good in spells too. So they've got a decent spine in there with Volta, who's come in from Nice and done well, and Benjamin Nive is obviously a reliable player despite being 41 now. So that they have like a solid core, but it's just whether they can score the goals to keep them up. And this game is huge. And as I said, if they lose, they're a few points behind Amiens. Toulouse might get a result, then they're looking like the relegation playoff might be theirs. So big game, but they've got players that belong in this division, and they've got the ability to keep them in this league. So still a long way to go, but they need to find goals from somewhere, as you mentioned, because that will likely, as it is for many of the teams down there, be their undoing.
Yeah, absolutely. And goals are a factor for Amiens as well. As I mentioned, really, it's only Moussa Konate who's grabbed 8, I think, but they've really been in spurts this season and very infrequent, and he's been in and out of the team as well. But Sam, they've got this game against Troyes at home, which is a massive one. They've got that game against Lille after the international break as well, but it'll be another huge game for them, because after that, you look at the fixtures left for them. There's an away game against Lyon. There's an away game against Monaco. They have to host Paris Saint-Germain. They have to go to Marseille on the final day of the season. Yes, there's maybe Metz and Strasbourg and Cologne, interesting ones spliced in there, but with those separated out as well, knocking confidence before those kind of games, these 2 games especially are the epitome of their season, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you can make an argument either way. You could say, well, sure, they've got the tough games, but they've got the winnable games, and they're the games they need to win. They would never have come into this season expecting, like, well, okay, we need to beat PSG, we need to beat Marseille to keep us up. I mean, obviously, they would never have factored those points into their plan. Their plan would have been, we need to beat Lille. Well, perhaps not at the start of the season, but certainly the team that's 19th, we need to beat them. So you can make that argument, but at the same time, this is a team that has a real bad habit of going on long runs without points, without goals, and if they can't find points in this and the next game, they will really find themselves in trouble, because, as Adams mentioned, the teams around them, will obviously be playing as well, and they could move ahead of them, and then they could find themselves in real trouble. And I think they've been quite fun this season, and it would be sad to see them to drop in and then drop out of the league. But there are other flaws there, as you mentioned. We've all mentioned tonight. Small budget players, not enough players scoring goals. Problems with long streaky runs of not putting together good results. Good performances here and there, but they really need to put 2 of those together here and then against Lille, because otherwise they could find themselves in trouble.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time for them. I do hope that they, at the moment at least, Amiens seem the more pluckier sides than some of them down there, really fighting at the bottom, and maybe they might just have enough against those games, maybe against especially a Lille side that might be dead and buried in terms of confidence-wise anyway, that they might get a real chance there. But let's get some predictions, and I'll start on this one. And following on from that, I think Amiens will nick this one. I think it'll be a 1-0 win for them, and that maybe really should put the Frighteners in Troyes, because that starts to make a real gap for them should other results go against them as well. Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Amiens 2-1.
Sam?
I'm going to go Amiens 1-0 as well.
Yeah, I really start to feel for Troyes, because especially they themselves don't have great games left. I mean, Nice, who are in good form after this one, Marseille, Saint-Etienne, Lyon, Montpellier, Monaco, some awful games. Caen, who are a side that can be up and down. Guingamp have been not in great form, but at the same time, they aren't the team you want to be facing away from home if you're struggling to score goals as well, because they will score goals. That's the issue. And you start to really worry that if Lille do pick up, that they might be the one sinking in their place. The other really big game around the bottom of the league as well is Toulouse hosting Strasbourg. Now, the away side have slowly sort of crawled themselves back into this fight almost on accident in the last couple of weeks. It's not been the greatest time for them, really. Ever since sort of the turn of the year, they had that win against Troyes, which felt like a big one that finally sort of got the monkey off the back, but then they lose to Paris Saint-Germain. They had the draw against Montpellier that was pretty poor, and then 2 losses in a row against Caen and Monaco have sort of shoved them back in the race. But a win here would be massive, especially with Nantes and Angers, Metz and Angers to come in the next couple of weeks, that could finally sort of put their relegation woes to bed if they do win in this one. But a loss in this one at the same time puts them right in the mix of it again, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it does. And they're 19th in the form table right now. I mean, you struggle to find anyone who's playing worse in Ligue 1 than they are. They're also 18th in the away from home table. So, this is to win a game like this would be for them running against both form and their previous sort of performances away from home. Plus factor into the fact that Toulouse are sort of slowly finding themselves. I mean, they gave a really good fist of that Marseille game last week. Before that, 3 consecutive draws. Strasbourg look like they're in trouble, and this could be. We see this from time to time. A promoted side that looks quite comfortable mid-season, even sort of the early second part of the season, and then they drop like a stone, and that's really what we're seeing from Strasbourg here. They since like February, they've just totally dropped off, and it's looking rough. I mean, the fact they were knocked out the Coupe de France by Chambly, that's really rough, and that certainly doesn't add to the confidence of the players. This is a real worry for Strasbourg. I think they're 15th, but they're not far away from relegation, and I think they could be really in trouble.
Yeah, I think they might just be a little bit lucky, given that their running just looks like it's not got that attrition that some other teams have got. I mean, they've already played Monaco, Montpellier in recent weeks, Paris Saint-Germain. They've already played Lyon. They've already played Marseille. Their running is obviously this Toulouse game, but Metz, Angers, Saint-Etienne, Amiens, Nice, Rennes. They do play Lyon again, sorry, near the end. And there's still some games where they can pick up points that might just about save them. But this Toulouse side, really, the home side, Adam, they can't really work them out at the moment sometimes. I mean, they had that, since they've changed manager, really, they've had some positive performances. They only lost 1-0 to Paris Saint-Germain, which was pretty unfortunate for them, but then they draw 0-0 with Amiens. They get a fantastic 3-3 draw against Monaco that they battled back in and earned that, but then draw to Metz, and then they did relatively well at the weekend as well against Marseille, although they did come up short again, losing 2-1. They need to start showing these okay performances that they are building into victories now, because they're still in and around those relegation places.
Yeah, absolutely. They're currently 17th, just a point above Troyes and Lille. With Toulouse, I kind of feel like you're absolutely right. Since Dupraz left, there's been a slight kind of resurgence in their results, at least. Performance-wise, I kind of feel like they're relatively similar. I thought they were, in the last few weeks of Dupraz's reign, I kind of felt like they were playing pretty well, perhaps not getting the results they deserved. They lost at Saint-Etienne 2-0, and I remember them being probably the better side in that game. It was really weird that they didn't get anything from it. It was one of Dupraz's last few games in charge, but for them, it just feels like they're sort of struggling to keep their heads above water. I mean, they've had those consecutive draws before that Marseille game, drawing with Metz away from home, just about got a draw there, got a draw, a really good draw, obviously, against Monaco, and drawing with Amiens. Like, they're just sort of fighting to stay in the league. And their expectations were that they'd be top half. They may even change for Europe at the start of the year. With Delors, thoroughly ensconced in the team, and he's very good at Caen, and Max Gradel coming in on loan and Bula coming in on loan. They really felt like they're a team that are on the up, and they've turned into a team that lacks any sort of identity. I think when Dupraz was there, they had that sort of rumbustious kind of battling, scrappy, intense kind of style for a bit, and that kind of faded quite quickly, and that was sort of the case when they were doing so well at the start of last season. and obviously when they stayed up brilliantly under him and too. But Debev's not going to last. I think he's there until the end of the season, and I doubt he'll start at the beginning of next season. And the next managerial appointment for this club will be huge, because if you look at over the last 4 or 5 seasons, you look as far back as Alan Casanova, and then Domi Arabadje, and then a lot of Dupraz's reign, and now Debev too. They've only just stayed up a lot of the time, and apart from that brief resurgence under Dupraz, and obviously he's a very motivational manager, but not the strongest tactically. And they need to find some identity if they do stay up this year. Otherwise, next year they make the wrong managerial appointment, they find themselves in a very similar situation, and they could drop out of the league again. So I just feel like they need to be. They need a club that they need a manager who's going to give them some sort of direction. And at the moment, I don't think Debev is that man. And although he's a very good coach, and he's been at the club a while, I think they will stay up. But it's a short-term fix, and that seems to be the case with Toulouse, that they're just managing to stay out. They're just managing to get out of trouble, and lose this game. We talked about Strasbourg; they're terrible away from home. And they're going to be dropping into this relegation fight too. But if they lose this game, then and Troyes get some sort of result, they could be dropping into the bottom 3. It's so tight between those bottom, if you include Metz, bottom 5 or 6, and it might not be enough this year. So it's very difficult to know where this club will be this time next season or the season after. And for a club that have promised so much, it's so disappointing to see them struggle. And I don't see that. I don't know how they can go about changing that. So a huge game, but this is the first of a number of battles to come. I think, that not just this season, next season too.
Yeah, absolutely. They need to start thinking long term what they want to do with this team, especially now. The worry now for a lot of teams, it will for them and any manager coming in, is that Alban Lafont is starting to look elsewhere, possibly to there's rumours of Napoli and a couple of English clubs as well. Maybe that might be I think that's maybe a bit too much of a step up yet. Just have that half step. Alban, you're still 18. We'll have that one, and then the European clubs can come in when you're 21, 22. You've got so much time ahead of you, really. But him, you think of Issa Diop will attract a lot of interest again in the summer from bigger clubs as well. Once they're pulled out, do they have the replacements for them? Because obviously they've come through the ranks there. They don't really do, unless we're missing something, and obviously they've got something in their back pocket that we're not expecting. But take those two out the side, you've lost some of your future. Well, hopefully you recover a lot of money, but if you're buying players like you did, well, at least loaning players like Kimbula and Gradel that had never really quite hit the ground running. Gradel's had a lot better games recently, but you look at Delors, who's not really kicked on. You look at Corentin Jean, who's not kicked on. Yaya Sanogo's had okay games. It's not the greatest. They still don't really have a link in midfield to add to the attacking games. I mean, Somalia plays sometimes. He's not great. Kawasaki is just an enforcer, really. They've got a lot they need to look at in the summer, really, and decide what direction this club's going to head in the next couple of years, at least. But predictions finally on this one. I'll start with you, Sam.
I'm going to go with my heart rather than my head and back Toulouse to win it 1-0.
Adam?
Yeah, me too. Toulouse 1-0.
I'm going to go the opposite way. I think Strasbourg might nick this one, and with Toulouse sort of middling a little bit, this might be their chance to seize on it, and hopefully in those next 3 games start to pull away. And I'm going to go for a 1-0 win for the away side to steal one there. On to the big match really of the weekend, especially for both the teams involved, and that's the 2 Europa League teams tonight in Marseille and Lyon. It's a huge game, especially for the away side. Adam, it's a strange one really for them, because like we mentioned earlier, it's been a tough one for them. They've struggled in the last couple of weeks, but it's a big game, this one, really, for them and for Genesio, really. Do you think that if they do lose this one, and that's quite conceivably third completely gone from their grasp, you can't imagine Marseille losing that many points to drop out of that place by that point. Do you think that's Genesio is the final nail in his coffin, and whether he goes straight after the game or in the summer, do you think that'll be the end of him?
Yeah, I think I do. I kind of think he's had enough chances. I mean, he's been around a long time now at Lyon, at least in modern terms, and it feels like they've started to deceive a number of times, and they've come close to being that sort of freewheeling, exciting, exuberant team that they could be. And they've had spells where they are that team, but they've not maintained it, and they haven't kicked on and really produced the performances consistently or the results that a club like Lyon expect. And last season, semi-finals of the Europa League, capitulated against Ajax. Same thing this evening against CSKA Moscow when they had a genuine shot at making, as I said earlier in the pod, making a real impact on this Europa League. Capitulated again. Just when they beat PSG in the league, they capitulated in Ligue 1 and lost to Bordeaux. And they keep doing the same thing, and it's becoming a bit of a cyclical thing for them. And Genesio, given it's happened so many times, and he's been there, a few years now, he has to take the blame for that. And they've got an exciting young team. They've got a lot of talent. They spent money on some. All right, they got money in for Tolisso and Lacazette and gone along in the summer, but they spent money on marquee signings like Depay, and you look at players like Ndombele and Aouar who are coming through. They've got the talent, and they need to be doing better with that talent. And I don't know that Genesio has proven himself as the man to get the best out of that talent consistently. And a club like Lyon will attract. They'll attract big name managers, and they'll attract very good managers given the new stadium, the resources, the support all that will give them, and the players are already there. I don't see this team breaking up anytime soon, unless Fekir may go in somewhere, I suppose. But I imagine he's around for at least one more season, perhaps. And there's a lot to work with at Lyon, and Genesio has not made the best of it. And I think there's a lot of other managers out there, perhaps, that could. And Aulas may come to the decision. I don't think it'll be after this game. I don't see him being sacked straight away, because if they do lose, to 8 points behind Marseille, I think he'll give it to the end of the season. But over the summer, as I said, I wouldn't be surprised if he did go, and assuming that they really did trail off in this fight for Champions League football. And it's just time. It just feels like it might be just time. He's had all his chances, and it's time for another manager to give it a shot.
Yeah, it feels like possibly this could finally be the end of him. And if anything, really, Sam, that is just opportunity to Marseille, who didn't do great against Toulouse, really, but they got the victory they needed. They stayed that gap between them. But this is probably, other than obviously they've still got the Europa League, but their season really in a nutshell. You look at the rest of the games they've got left after this one in the league, and you've got Dijon. Montpellier will be a tough one, but they do have them at home, which is a positive. Troyes, Lille, Angers, Nice, Guingamp, Amiens. There's not really any worries in that one, maybe other than Nice towards the end of the season, but it again depends on which one of those turn up or where they are come early May when they do face them. A win here pushes Lyon much further away from them and gives them a real chance. Well, it gives them ample opportunities, really, with them still being in the Europa League of Champions League football next season. This is the be and all end all for them, isn't it?
It is, and I think it's going to be a really, really interesting reflection of where this team is. You mentioned the Toulouse game, didn't play well, got a result. It's kind of gone a little bit under the radar just how often they've done that this season. Marseille have often not been great for 90 minutes certainly, but found a way to win, found a way to get points, and that's really, really not what we expected perhaps of a team that was a little bit cobbled together. There was real question marks over the manager, and yet they've really shown a sort of esprit de corps. They've really pushed for results that maybe they didn't even deserve, and they've got them, and that's really important. Add to that the fact that when they played PSG earlier in the season, they were fantastic. They rose to that occasion. They were really, really strong. But obviously, more recently, played PSG twice. Very, very big games, both for Marseille, as a real test of where they are. And they failed both those tests quite badly. So this game is another test and will really sort of show us where they've come to. Can they rise to the big occasion against a Lyon, who are not exactly in good form, but obviously a very top quality team, a team who themselves beat PSG earlier this season? If Marseille can rise to this and really actually not play them off the park, play them, beat them, outdo Lyon, that's going to be really important. It's going to really show that not only can they sort of hustle in the tricky games against a frustrating opponent like Toulouse, but they can really rise for the big games and beat a side like Lyon, who despite the fact they aren't winning games, are still, as Adams mentioned, a very, very talented side, deep with quality, arguably, possibly on paper, a better side than Marseille. But Marseille have put it together more often than not this season, and I expect they'll do it again on Sunday.
Yeah, it feels like this Marseille team, like you mentioned, Sam, have sort of snuck through a couple of games, but this is maybe finally, and we've said it a few times, it feels like this can be their statement game of their season, because it feels like with the quality that they've done and the job that Rudy Garcia has done with this team, at the start of the season, you would have never said, oh, well, I definitely wouldn't have said this, but this Marseille team doesn't feel a million miles away from fighting with Monaco for second. I don't think anyone's close to facing PSG unless they had another down year, which doesn't feel like it will happen anywhere in the near future. But they're not a million miles away with 3 or 4 signings. You think maybe a strong striker, you think maybe an extra midfielder, and possibly a more mobile centre-back, possibly as well, and possibly a right-back. They're a really interesting project again. You think the money they've possibly got behind them to try and find the options that they might have in Ligue 1 to bolster their ranks as well, and look elsewhere possibly and use the resources they have, get someone else, and they could be really, really interesting next season. But this is a massive game for them the weekend. It's massive for both, really, as Lyon sort of cling on to that fourth ball, the hope of Champions League football with their fingernails. Let's get some predictions, and I'll start off on this one. I think this is going to be a 2-1 win for Marseille, and finally they feel like they get that statement win on their season and probably ride off for the rest of the Ligue 1 season comfortably in that third position, as they, at this point at least, they will truly deserve. Adam, what do you think?
I'm going to say 2-2. Lyon are genuinely better against the big teams. It kind of suits their style of play. So high scoring and 2 each.
Sam?
I'm really hoping Florian Thauvin, who's back now, can really give a statement game of his own. I think he's been criticised a little bit for his performances in the bigger games, and I'm hoping to see a really big performance from Thauvin. So I'm going to say 3-1 with Thauvin man of the match.
Yeah, that'd be great, especially with him obviously not in the France squad this evening, and we'll talk about that on our main pod on Monday. But he'll be a little bit disappointed with that, and looking at. Obviously, it looked like at that point he might still be injured, but he did play this evening, which was a real positive for him. And players coming to form, it'll be a really, really interesting. And do tune into that one on Sunday. It almost guarantees goal at a Marseille-Lyon game. So that's all for this week. My thanks to Adam and Sam and all of you listening at home. Join us for the main show on Monday. But for now, enjoy your weekend of football.